Introduction by English translator Henry A. Holmes. The remarkable treatise which I introduce to your notice is a translation from one of the numerous works of the Arabian philosopher Abu Hamid Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali, who flourished in the 11th century. He was born about the year A.D. 1056, or 450 of the Muhammadan era, at Tus in Khorasan, and he died in the prime of life, in his native country, about the year 1111 or 505 A.H. Although educated by Mohammedan parents, he avows that during a considerable period of his life he was a prey to doubts about the truth, and that at times he was an absolute skeptic. While yet comparatively young, his learning and genius recommended him to the renowned sovereign Nizam al-Mulk, who gave him a professorship in the college which he had founded at Baghdad. His speculative mind still harassing him with doubts, and in his enthusiasm to arrive at a solid foundation for knowledge, he resigned his position, visited Mecca and Jerusalem, and finally returned to Khorasan, where he led a life of both monastic study and devotion, and consecrated his pen to writing the results of his meditations. Muhammadan scholars of the present day still hold him in such high respect that his name is never mentioned by them without some such distinctive epithet as the scientific Imam or chief witness for Islamism. His rank in the Eastern world as a philosopher and a theologian had naturally given his name some distinction in our histories of philosophy. It is enumerated in connection with those of Averroes, Abu Rushd, and Avicenna, Abu Sina, as illustrating the intellectual life and the philosophical schools of the Mohammedans. Still his writings were less known than those of either of the other two. His principal work, The Destruction of the Philosophers, called forth, in reply, one of the two most important works of Averroes, entitled The Destruction of the Destruction. Averroes, in his commentary upon Aristotle, extracts copiously from al-Ghazali for the purpose of refuting his views. A short treatise of his had been published at Cologne in 1506, and Pocock had given, in Latin, his interpretation of the two fundamental articles of the Mohammedan creed. Von Hammer printed in 1838 at Vienna a translation of a moral essay, Ayyuhal Walad, as a New Year's token for youth. It has been reserved to our own times to obtain a more intimate acquaintance with al-Ghazali. This has been chiefly by means of a translation into French by Monsieur Pallia of his Confessions, wherein he announces very clearly his philosophical views, and from an essay on his writings by Monsieur Smulders. In consequence, Mr. Lewis, who in his first edition of the biographical History of Philosophy found no place for al-Ghazali, is induced in his last edition by the evidence which that treatise contains that he was one of the controlling minds of his age to devote an entire section to an exhibition of his opinions in the same series with Abelard and Bruno, and to make him the typical figure representing Arabian philosophy. For a full account of al-Ghazali's school of philosophy, we refer to his history and to the two essays just mentioned. We would observe very briefly, however, that like most of the learned Mohammedans of his age, he was a student of Aristotle. While they regarded all the Greek philosophers as infidels, they availed themselves of their logic and their principles of philosophy to maintain, as far as possible, the dogmas of the Quran. Al-Ghazali's mind possessed, however, Platonizing tendencies, and he affiliated himself with the Sufis, or mystics, in his later years. He was in antagonism with men who appeared to him, like Avicenna, to exalt reason above the Koran. Yet he himself went to the extreme limits of reasoning in his endeavors to find an intelligible basis for the doctrines of the Koran and a philosophical basis for a holy rule of life. His character and his moral and intellectual rank are vividly depicted in the following extract from the writings of Tholuck, a prominent leader of the modern evangelical school of Germany. Al-Ghazali, says Tholuck, if ever any man have deserved the name, was truly a divine, and he may justly be placed on a level with Origen. So remarkable was he for learning and ingenuity, and gifted with such a rare faculty for the skilful and worthy exposition of doctrine. All that is good, noble, and sublime, which his great soul had compassed, he bestowed upon Muhammadanism. He adorned the doctrines of the Koran with so much piety and learning that in the form given them by him, they seem, in my opinion, worthy of the assent of Christians. Whatsoever was most excellent in the philosophy of Aristotle or in Sufi mysticism, he discreetly adapted to Mohammedan theology. From every school he sought the means of shedding light and honor upon religion, while his sincere piety and lofty conscientiousness imparted to all his writings a sacred majesty. He was the first of Mohammedan divines. Sayla, in the preliminary discourse to his translation of the Koran, shows that he had discovered the peculiar traits of al-Ghazali's mind. For wherever he gives an explanation of the Mussulman creed which is peculiarly consonant with universal reason and opposed to superstition, it will be found that he quotes from him. This treatise on the Alchemy of Happiness, or Kimiya-yi Sa adat, seems well adapted to extend our knowledge of the writings of al-Ghazali and of the opinions current, then and now, in the Oriental world. Although it throws no light on questions of geography, philology, or political history, the objects most frequently in view in translations from the Oriental languages, yet a book which exhibits, with such plainness, the opinions of so large a portion of the human race as the Mohammedans, on questions of philosophy, practical morality, and religion, will always be as interesting to the general reader and to a numerous class of students as the facts that may be elicited to complete a series of kings in a dynasty, or to establish the site of an ancient city can be to the historian or the geographer. I translate it from an edition published in Turkish in 1845 or 1260 AH at the Imperial Printing Press in Constantinople. As no books are allowed to be printed there which have not passed under the eyes of the censor, the doctrines presented in the book indicate not only the opinions of 800 years since, but also what views are regarded as orthodox, or tolerated among the Orthodox at the present day. It has also been printed in Persian at Calcutta. In form, the book contains a treatise on practical piety. But, as is the case with a large proportion of Mohammedan works, the author, whatever may be his subject, finds a place for observations reaching far beyond his apparent aim. Thus, our author is led to make many observations which develop his notions in anatomy, physiology, natural philosophy, and natural religion. The partisans of all sorts of opinions will be interested in finding that a Mohammedan author, writing so long since in the center of Asia, had occasion to approve or condemn so many truths, speculations, or fancies which are now current among us with the reputation of novelty. Many of the same paradoxes and problems that startle or fascinate in the 19th century are here discussed. He came into contact, among his contemporaries, with persons who made the same general objections to natural and revealed religion, as understood by Mohammedans, as are, in our days, made to Christianity, or who perverted and abused the religion which they professed for their own ends, in the same manner as Christianity is abused among us. He engaged with earnestness, now truthfully and now erroneously, in refuting these men. His usual standpoint in discussion is equally removed from the most extravagant mysticism and from literal and formal orthodoxy. He attempts a dignified blending of reason and faith, requiring of his fellow men unfeigned piety in the temper and tone of an evangelical Christian. He reminds his readers in these discourses that they are not Mussulmans if they are satisfied with merely a nominal faith, and he treats with scorn those who are spiritualists only in language and dress. It is too narrow a view to adopt in regard to a man of the sublime character of al-Ghazali that he obtained his ideas from any one school of thinkers, or that being in fellowship with the Sufis, he was merely a Sufi. He was living in the center of Aryan peoples and religions. He may have had his doctrine of the future life shaped by Zoroaster, and may have been influenced by the missionaries of the Buddhists. The practical religion taught in these homilies will give a favorable opinion of the state of mind of the more intelligent Mussulmans. They contain not the Mohammedanism of the creed or the catechism, but that of the closet and the pulpit. The tenor of the book establishes the truth of Ibn Khalikan's remark in his biographical dictionary that al-Ghazali's ruling passion was making public exhortations. While perusing these pages and noticing how much of the language of al-Ghazali corresponds, in its representations of God, of a holy life, and of eternity, with the solemn instructions to which we have listened from our infancy, we may think of the magicians who imitated the miracles of Moses with their enchantments. Yet assuredly a vivid and respectful interest must be awakened in our minds for the races and nations whose ideas of their relations as immortal beings are so serious and earnest. The translation I have endeavored to make a close transcript of the meaning of the Turkish, having especially sought to find appropriate equivalents for native idioms. I have designated the chapter and verse of nearly every passage quoted from the Quran. The omissions in the text which are made apparent by signs are limited to digressions of the author, to repetitions, and to some of the illustrations, so that there is no interruption of the continuity of thought in the themes discussed. The Turkish edition itself was but a portion of the original work. 2 or 3 notes are added, either explanatory of the text or illustrative of the author, from Oriental sources.